For days before Suzanne Morphew vanished, she sent her husband a text message. 7 words. "I'm done." She continued, "I could care less what you're up to and have been for years. We just need to figure this out civilly." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't the middle of an argument caught on a bad day. It was a decision. Suzanne Morphew had made up her mind. Her marriage was over. She just had to figure out how to end it. Barry Morphew deleted that text from his phone. Investigators found it anyway. For days after Suzanne sent it, she climbed onto her mountain bike on Mother's Day morning and rode off into the foothills near her Colorado home. She never came back. Her bike was found tossed down a ravine. No blood. No sign of a crash. Her phone, her car, her sunglasses, all left behind at the house, as if she'd only meant to be gone an hour. More than 3 years would pass before anyone found her body. And when they finally did, investigators found something else inside her remains, traces of a rare tranquilizer used to sedate deer, a drug prosecutors say only one person in that entire region of Colorado could legally possess. It wasn't anywhere searchers had ever looked. In between those two moments, the text message and the discovery, sit 5 years of arrests, dismissals, disbarments, lawsuits, a hidden recording device, a fraudulent vote, a cremation dispute, and a chemical compound most people have never heard of. Her husband stood in front of television cameras during those 3 years, begging for her safe return. He was arrested for her murder. The charges were dropped in a stunning collapse just 9 days before trial. Then, years later, a new discovery, new evidence, and a second arrest. He has never confirmed her death. He has never wavered from his denial, absolutely not. So here is the question that has haunted Chaffee County, Colorado, since the spring of 2020, and that has now haunted it for half a decade, through 2 arrests, 1 collapsed prosecution, and a body found in a county nobody thought to search. Did a woman who tried to leave her husband pay for that decision with her life? What happened to Suzanne Morphew? The text message answered one part of that question 5 years ago. She wanted out. She said so herself, in 7 words, 4 days before she disappeared. The rest of the question, who took her life, and how, and why the case has taken this long to even reach a courtroom, is still being written. Let's start with the text message, and the marriage behind it. Suzanne Morphew wasn't a woman preparing to disappear. She was a mother of 2, a cancer survivor, and a woman building a new life in the Colorado mountains, mountain bike rides, family photos, by every appearance living her best chapter. She'd already survived one fight most people never have to face. Suzanne had battled Hodgkin's lymphoma once before, beaten it, and moved on with her life. Friends who knew her described a woman who threw herself fully into whatever chapter she was in, first as a schoolteacher in Indiana, then as a mother raising 2 daughters, Mallory and Macy, and finally as a transplant to a small Colorado mountain town she'd chosen for a fresh start. She rode her bike constantly, not for show, but because it was genuinely part of who she was. People who knew her in Salida remember her as social, warm, and visibly proud of her girls. By 2020, that cancer had returned. She was quietly back in treatment, managing a second fight with the same disease, while still showing up, still smiling, still posting the photos that made her new life look effortless to anyone scrolling past. She had survived all of that. The diagnosis, the treatment, the relapse. And somewhere in the middle of fighting for her own life, she'd also reached a decision she could no longer ignore. Her marriage was over. She told friends. She told family. Her husband, it turns out, already suspected something was wrong before she ever said a word to him directly. A woman who had already fought her way back from cancer once was now fighting to get her life back on her own terms a second time. Neither she nor Barry could have known how this would end. Every disappearance like this one raises the same first question investigators have to answer: was this an accident, a stranger, or someone the victim already knew? For Suzanne Morphew, The answer to that question started taking shape long before May 2020, in a marriage that, on the surface, looked like any other long marriage under strain, but underneath was unraveling in ways neither spouse fully admitted to the other. By January 2020, for months before she vanished, Suzanne had taken what court documents describe as clear, deliberate steps toward ending her marriage. She told her family. She told her closest friends. Not as a complaint. As a stated plan. This wasn't someone thinking about divorce someday. Suzanne was already emotionally out of the marriage. The question wasn't whether she would leave. The question was when, and how. But here is where the case gets strange. Suzanne reportedly believed Barry was monitoring her phone. So she started keeping secret notes about incidents in the marriage, written where she thought he wouldn't find them. She also believed Barry was cheating on her. So she planted a hidden recording device, sometimes called a spy pen, in court filings, inside Barry's truck. She wanted proof of his affair. The pen never caught Barry with anyone. Instead, it caught something nobody expected, recordings of intimate conversations between Suzanne and a man identified only as Jeff. The device she planted to expose her husband's secrets ended up exposing her own. Investigators identified the man as Jeff Libler, an old high school acquaintance, an alleged 2-year relationship that included meetings in several states. The FBI interviewed him months later and ruled him out as a target. Suzanne's suspicion about Barry, in other words, turned out to be unfounded. The marriage wasn't being threatened by the infidelity she feared from him, it was already broken by the infidelity she herself had chosen. Barry had his own secret too. A search of his phone reportedly turned up deleted visits to the dating website Ashley Madison. 2 people, married, each quietly suspicious of the other. Each hiding something. One of them about to disappear. By the spring of 2020, friends told detectives the couple had been arguing over money. Over trust. Over everything a marriage falls apart over. Through every twist in this case, the first arrest, the dismissal, the lawsuit, the second arrest, one fact has remained constant. Mallory and Macy, the couple's 2 daughters, have publicly stood by their father the entire time. They were teenagers when their mother vanished. They are adults now, and they have never once, on the record, said they believe he is guilty. That loyalty is its own kind of evidence, though not the kind a courtroom can weigh. It says nothing about what actually happened on Mother's Day 2020. It says everything about how impossible this case has been for the people who have to live inside it, not just watch it. Suzanne's best friend, Sheila Oliver, became one of the most important witnesses in the entire case. Over the 2 years before Suzanne vanished, Suzanne had reportedly confided in Oliver by text and by phone, sharing the kinds of details about a marriage that you only tell the one person you trust completely. Those messages would later become evidence. On May 6, 2020, Suzanne sent the text, "I'm done." She told Barry she didn't care anymore what he'd been doing, and have been for years. She wanted to handle the breakup civilly. Barry deleted the message. For days later, Suzanne was gone. It would be more than 3 years before anyone found her. And when they finally did, her remains would carry the signature of a rare animal tranquilizer, one that, according to prosecutors, only a single person in that part of Colorado was legally allowed to possess. Keep that detail in mind. Almost everything that follows leads back to it. The last confirmed evidence that Suzanne Morphew was alive is a selfie. She took it on the afternoon of May 9, 2020, the day before she vanished, and sent it to Jeff Libler. That same morning, 59 separate messages had been exchanged between the 2 of them. Whatever was happening in Suzanne's personal life, she was deeply engaged in it right up until the last hours anyone can verify she was alive. The next morning is where everything falls apart. Barry told investigators he left the house around 5 a.m. for a work trip to Broomfield, a few hours away. He said Suzanne was asleep when he left. But his own phone and vehicle data tell a different story. showing activity closer to 3:30 a.m., a full 90 minutes before the time he gave detectives. Why the discrepancy? Barry has never fully explained it. He says he texted Suzanne, "Happy Mother's Day," that morning. No response. He called. Still nothing. He didn't call her again during the drive. According to investigators, he showed no urgency at all, until a neighbor phoned to say Suzanne appeared to be missing. Then Barry turned around and came home. Think about the order of events here. A husband learns his wife might be missing on Mother's Day. He doesn't call her repeatedly. He doesn't rush. He finishes out a chunk of his day before a neighbor, not his own instinct, sends him back home. And when he walked through that door, according to deputies on scene, his first question wasn't, "Where is she?" or "What happened?" It was whether an animal could have killed her. Outside, deputies found Suzanne's mountain bike, down in a ravine off the road. No damage consistent with a crash. No blood. Inside the house, her car, her phone, her sunglasses, her helmet. Everything she would normally take on a ride, left behind. And one more detail that investigators would return to again and again. At some point before she disappeared, Suzanne had reportedly disabled the home security cameras, the same cameras that might have caught whoever, or whatever, last saw her alive. Why would she do that? Investigators believe it connects back to her stated suspicion that Barry was monitoring her movements and her devices. If true, it means the one piece of technology that might have settled this entire case once and for all was switched off by Suzanne herself, weeks or months before she needed it most, an act of self-protection from one threat that may have left her undefended against another. It's one of the cruelest ironies in the entire case. The privacy she fought for from her husband may be the exact reason no one will ever know, with footage in hand, what actually happened to her. No witness has ever come forward to confirm seeing Suzanne ride her bike that morning. No one saw what happened next. That Mother's Day, the house was quieter than usual. Suzanne's daughters, 16-year-old Macy and 20-year-old Mallory, were away on a church camping trip, expected home later that day. Whatever happened to their mother that morning, she faced it without them. She was reported missing on Mother's Day, May 10, 2020. Within hours, deputies were combing the property. Within days, this quiet mountain town would become the center of a national investigation. And within days, investigators would start noticing that Barry Morphew's story didn't add up. The questions piled up fast. Why was his phone active 90 minutes before the time he gave detectives? Why hadn't he called his wife again during the drive? Why was his first instinct, walking through the door that evening, to ask about an animal attack, instead of asking what police had found? None of those questions, on their own, prove anything. But together, they were enough to make investigators look a lot closer at the man begging cameras for his wife's safe return. More than 100 people joined the search. Cadaver dogs, drones, water rescue teams, tactical mountain units combing terrain that took days to access on foot. Barry offered a $100,000 reward. A family friend doubled it to $200,000. The search itself became a kind of public ritual, volunteers showing up on weekends, strangers from other states flying in to help, all of it broadcast across local and then national news. For weeks, the entire country watched a small Colorado county try to will a missing woman back home. 2 weeks in, the FBI searched a construction site where Barry had recently been working. They also tore through the Morphew home. They found nothing definitive. Suzanne's nephew, Trevor Noel, described those early weeks to local reporters, teams gathering at dawn, mapping out search grids, sending crews into the backcountry every single day, hoping for any clue at all. Day after day, the searches turned up nothing. But while the public searched the mountains, investigators were quietly building a very different picture indoors. Surveillance footage from a Holiday Inn Express, where Barry stayed during his supposed work trip, shows him walking into his room. 19 minutes later, he walks back out. Different shirt. Carrying a trash can. What was in it? Nobody outside the investigation has ever said for certain. Barry also made 5 separate trash runs that day, despite claiming he was rushing to an urgent job. Investigators noted that he was also seen, on hotel footage, resting in his room and changing outfits more than once, behavior they found difficult to reconcile with a man under genuine time pressure to complete urgent work. 5 unexplained stops. A wardrobe change. A trash can no one has explained. On the exact day his wife vanished. Defense attorneys have pushed back on reading too much into ordinary behavior, pointing out that changing clothes and stopping at trash receptacles, while unusual to highlight in a murder case, are not inherently evidence of anything more sinister than an unremarkable day on the road. The prosecution has countered that the volume and timing of these actions, layered onto everything else, paint a different picture entirely. Consider the math of that one day alone. A husband who claims he's racing against the clock to reach a job site finds time to rest in a hotel room, change his shirt twice, and make 5 separate stops at the trash. Innocent people have unremarkable days too. But investigators wanted to know why this particular unremarkable day happened to be the one his wife disappeared on. In October 2020, Barry gave his first public interview, sharing love letters and photos, floating the idea that Suzanne had been abducted. Behind the scenes, investigators were finding something else entirely, a husband whose own phone and travel records kept contradicting his own account of that morning. Then investigators learned something almost impossible to believe. While search teams were still combing the mountains for Suzanne, Barry filled out her 2020 election ballot himself and cast a fraudulent vote in her name, months after she'd vanished, already presumed by many to be dead. He later told investigators he wanted Trump to win, and figured other people were cheating too. He pleaded guilty to forgery of a government-issued document and was sentenced to community service, a deferred sentence, and a fine. A man secretly voting in his missing wife's name, while the FBI searched the mountains for her body. For investigators, it wasn't comic. It was data, a window into how comfortable Barry was with deception, even on matters that had nothing to do with Suzanne's disappearance, even with the eyes of the entire country on him. If he was willing to fake his missing wife's vote, what else might he be willing to fake? Meanwhile, the case had become a national phenomenon. It was the subject of a CBS News 48 Hours investigation. Amateur internet sleuths and true crime podcasters dug through public filings on their own, conducted their own interviews, and in at least one case, secretly recorded a conversation with Barry himself, a conversation in which he again suggested his wife had been abducted. The sheer scale of public attention on a small mountain community would later become a legal problem of its own. A judge would eventually rule that the media saturation made a fair trial impossible in the county where Suzanne disappeared. But that was still ahead. And the investigation had 2 more turns left that nobody saw coming. The first involved Barry's own phone. When investigators pressed him about unusual activity on his cell records, he offered an explanation almost too strange to invent. He said he'd probably been outside, walking the property, shooting chipmunks. Investigators found no physical evidence that any chipmunk shooting had taken place that day. It became, almost despite itself, one of the case's most quoted details, a strange, flimsy excuse offered up at the exact moment investigators needed a real one. The second turn was far more serious. Then investigators found something that complicated everything. DNA. Not Barry's. Forensic teams recovered unidentified male DNA on Suzanne's bike, her helmet, inside the house, and inside her Range Rover. Testing showed a partial match to a man connected to 3 unsolved sexual assault cases in Tempe, Phoenix, and Chicago. To this day, nobody has identified him. Nobody has ruled him out, either. If Suzanne didn't disappear at her husband's hands, that unidentified DNA is the single strongest reason to believe someone else's hands were involved instead. By 2021, investigators believed they had enough. What happened next would either close this case or blow it wide open. On May 5, 2021, almost exactly a year after Suzanne disappeared, Barry Morphew was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. It came after roughly 30 separate interviews investigators say Barry gave to law enforcement over the preceding year, interviews in which, according to his own attorney, he told detectives Suzanne had been his angel since she was 17. Despite all those hours of talking, despite presenting himself as a grieving, cooperative husband, the arrest came anyway. The arrest affidavit, eventually made public, laid out a theory that sounds almost too specific to be circumstantial. Prosecutors alleged that on the afternoon of May 9, 2020, Barry loaded a tranquilizer dart, put his phone into airplane mode, and shot his wife with it, then chased her around the house until the drug took effect. The evidence behind that theory centered on one substance, BAM, a three-chemical compound, butorphanol, azaparone, and medetomidine, used to tranquilize deer. According to prescription records cited by prosecutors, there was exactly one private citizen in that entire region of Colorado with legal access to BAM. Barry Morphew. He had used it before, on deer, in Indiana. He admitted to using it again, on a deer near his own breezeway, just 1 month before Suzanne disappeared. Agents also documented what they described as scratches on Barry's left arm in the days after Suzanne vanished, a detail prosecutors have pointed to as possible evidence of a physical struggle, though no one has ever conclusively explained how he got them. In January 2022, prosecutors laid out this theory publicly for the first time during a preliminary hearing, a hearing meant only to determine whether there was enough evidence to send the case to trial, not to prove guilt. It was the public's first real look inside the investigation. Hundreds of pages of motions, filings, and exhibits were eventually released, including a witness list naming more than 500 people prosecutors believed might be relevant to the case. 500 names. In a case with, at that point, no body. The affidavit also revealed how Barry explained away his wife's unhappiness to investigators. He blamed it on alcohol and on the effects of her chemotherapy, despite, in his own words, insisting she wasn't normally a heavy drinker. And after learning of her affair, the affidavit states, Barry repeatedly described her disappearance as an act of God's judgment, calling it, simply, God's will. Barry has never agreed with any of this. In a televised interview, asked point-blank if he had anything to do with his wife's disappearance, his answer was immediate. Absolutely not. He accused investigators of tunnel vision, insisting, I don't have anything to worry about. I've done nothing wrong. He described his marriage in completely different terms, a wonderful life, a wonderful marriage, and called Suzanne so loving and giving, and such a good mother. Two completely different versions of the same marriage. One from a law enforcement affidavit. One from the man accused of murder. Only one of them could be telling the whole truth. Barry's defense team, led by attorney Iris Eitan, argued from the very beginning that the case was built almost entirely on circumstance, a timeline, a chemical, a deleted text, and a husband whose marriage had clearly gone bad, but none of it amounting to actual proof of murder. They pointed out that prosecutors had no body, no murder weapon recovered, no witness. Nothing but inference stacked on inference. It was a fair question, and a dangerous one for the prosecution. How do you convict a man of murder when you can't even say, with certainty, what happened to the body? And then, the case took a turn nobody saw coming, from inside the investigation itself. In December 2021, the case's own lead investigator dropped a bombshell. CBI agent Joseph Cahill told Internal Affairs that arresting Barry Morphew had been the worst decision that could be made, premature, hasty, made over his own objections to the sheriff. The sheriff moved forward anyway. The strange part, Cahill wasn't even being interviewed about the Morphew case. The probe started over an unrelated incident, Cahill accidentally shooting himself in the hand off-duty. His opinion on the arrest only surfaced because of that. If his gun had never gone off, the defense might never have gotten it on the record. The defense seized on it. The DA's office called the argument utter nonsense and said Cahill had been thoroughly discredited. But the damage to the case's credibility was done, compounded by a judge recusal, then a venue change out of Chaffee County after a court ruled the media coverage there had made a fair trial impossible. Then, on April 19, 2022, 9 days before trial, prosecutors dropped the charges. Not because new evidence cleared Barry. Because of how the case had been built and handled. The dismissal came without prejudice, meaning prosecutors could refile later. Had the case gone to trial and ended in acquittal, they never could have. That single distinction is the reason this story didn't end in 2022. Barry walked out of the courthouse holding his daughter's hands. A free man. The fallout was severe. DA Linda Stanley was later recommended for disbarment over improper media statements that helped drive the case out of its original county. Barry filed a $15 million lawsuit claiming the wrongful arrest cost him his home, his business, and his community. A federal judge later dismissed it, but not without a line that has echoed through this case since: Barry, like anyone accused of a crime, deserves better than what happened here. And Suzanne Morphew certainly deserved better. For more than a year, the case sat frozen. Barry was free. Suzanne's body had never been found. That was about to change, in a place absolutely no one had been looking. For more than 3 years, investigators searched the mountains around Salida. The ravines. The forests. The bike trails she rode every week. Search teams went back to the same hillside season after season, hoping the terrain would finally give something up. It never did. Because Suzanne wasn't there. On September 22, 2023, more than 3 years after she vanished, investigators were searching a remote stretch of land near the town of Moffat, in Saguache County, nearly an hour from anywhere anyone had ever looked. They weren't looking for Suzanne. They were searching for an entirely different missing woman, Edna Quintana, in a case investigators say is unrelated. A different file. A different family waiting for answers. Nobody on that search team expected to find anything connected to the Morphew case at all. Instead, in a shallow grave in the sagebrush, they found human remains. 5 days later, the coroner confirmed it. Suzanne Morphew. Found, at last, more than 3 years after she disappeared. The remains, according to the coroner's office, were scattered across a wide swath of sagebrush-dotted prairie, not contained in a single, undisturbed grave site. Forensic teams spent days at the location, recovering bones across the terrain. The dispersal pattern itself became a piece of evidence, suggesting time, weather, and likely animal activity had moved her remains across the landscape over the more than 3 years she lay there undiscovered. It was a grim, painstaking recovery effort, investigators working a wide grid, on their knees, in sagebrush, looking for fragments of a woman the entire country had been searching for since 2020. But the location made no sense. The grave sat roughly a 45-minute drive from where Suzanne was last seen alive, in a different county entirely, in an area no search team had ever focused on. And according to information that surfaced in later filings, Barry's own phone and vehicle data placed him nowhere near that area on the days she vanished. If he killed her, how did her body end up there? Who moved it, and when? Those two questions, more than any other in this entire case, are the ones the 2025 indictment now has to answer to a jury. Then the lab found something investigators had been talking about for 3 years. Something they had built an entire arrest around, back in 2021, before they ever had a body to test. Something prosecutors once claimed only one private citizen in that entire region of Colorado legally possessed. Traces of butorphanol, azapirone, and medetomidine, found in Suzanne's remains. BAM. The exact deer tranquilizer Barry Morphew had already admitted to using. It took until April 2024, nearly 4 years after she disappeared, for her death to be officially ruled a homicide. And still, for nearly 2 more years, no new arrest. The wait was almost unbearable for the people who loved her. Friends gathered in Salida to mark the anniversaries, releasing butterflies, lighting candles, demanding the case not go cold even with a body finally in hand. 3 years of search seasons, 3 years of vigils, 3 years of a family answering the same unanswerable question from strangers, and still, after the body was found, 2 more years of waiting for anyone to be charged. Then, on June 18, 2025, a grand jury indicted Barry Morphew again. He was arrested in Arizona 2 days later. First-degree murder. For the second time. The new indictment alleged something even more disturbing than the original theory, that Suzanne's body had been moved at least twice after she died, and that toxicology results showed her body had already begun metabolizing the tranquilizer before she actually died, meaning her death, according to prosecutors, was not immediate. The chemical compound, prosecutors say, takes several minutes to fully sedate a person. That detail matters enormously to the case being built against Barry. If she didn't go down instantly, then whoever administered the drug would have had to be there, in the same room, for however long it took to take effect. Investigators have long theorized that this is exactly what happened, that Barry tranquilized his wife and then pursued her through the house as the drug worked its way through her system. It is a theory. It is not, as of today, a proven fact. But it is the spine of the prosecution's case heading into trial. Barry pleaded not guilty. His defense argues there is still no direct evidence, no body found anywhere near him, no confession, no witness, only chemistry and circumstance. The legal fight that followed has been almost as strange as everything that came before it. In early 2026, Barry moved to have Suzanne's remains cremated, signing release paperwork with a local funeral home. Prosecutors intervened immediately, arguing her remains needed to be preserved for independent testing ahead of trial. The couple's own daughters then filed, and later withdrew, a motion seeking custody of their mother's body themselves. Even in death, Suzanne Morphew's body has become a piece of evidence fought over by the people who loved her, her husband on one side, prosecutors on the other, and her own daughters caught somewhere in between, ultimately stepping back from the fight altogether. The case is now barreling towards something it has never actually reached in 5 years, a trial. It's scheduled for October 2026. But even with a body, even with the chemical evidence, does any of this prove what actually happened inside that house? Strip away every theory, every headline, every podcast episode built around this case, and here is what's actually documented. Suzanne Morphew was trying to leave her marriage. She said so, in writing, to her husband, for days before she vanished. She'd been involved in a 2-year affair. Her husband suspected infidelity on her part too, and harbored enough resentment that he reportedly described her disappearance as God's punishment for it, before her death was even confirmed. Barry's own account of the morning she vanished does not match his phone and vehicle data. He's been documented making unexplained stops, changing clothes, carrying an unidentified trash can, and showing no urgency in trying to reach his missing wife. He had access to, and admitted using, a rare animal tranquilizer that was later found in his wife's remains, a substance prosecutors say only he had legal access to in that part of Colorado. That's what's documented. Here's what isn't documented with the same certainty. No one has ever produced a confession, an eyewitness, or direct physical evidence placing Barry at the scene. The location of her remains still doesn't cleanly match where his own data placed him that weekend. Prosecutors say her body was moved more than once, but who moved it, and when, has never been fully explained in public. And the original case didn't collapse because evidence cleared Barry. It collapsed because the people building it fell apart from the inside, including the lead investigator's own admission that the arrest was premature. There's also the DNA. Unidentified male DNA was recovered on Suzanne's bike, her helmet, inside her car, and inside the house, DNA that partially matched a man tied to unsolved sexual assaults in 3 other cities. Investigators have never identified him, and have never ruled him out. There is a version of this case where Barry Morphew is exactly what prosecutors say he is, a husband who could not accept being left, who had the means and the access to a rare chemical compound, and who has spent 5 years lying about a morning only he truly knows the truth of. There is also a version, the one his defense has fought for twice now, where an innocent man has been arrested twice on a circumstantial theory, and the real answer is still out there, unexamined, because investigators settled on a suspect before they'd settled the facts. Both cannot be true. Only a jury, sometime after October 2026, will decide which one is, assuming this case, unlike its first attempt, actually reaches a verdict. 5 years, 2 arrests, 1 disbarred prosecutor, 1 fraudulent vote, and 1 set of remains found 3 years late in the wrong county, and the central question is still exactly where it started: can the state prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Barry Morphew killed his wife? Not, is it suspicious? Prove it. Prosecutors believe Barry Morphew tranquilized his wife inside their own home, then disposed of, and later moved, her body. That is the theory a jury will finally be asked to weigh, 5 years after she disappeared. Suzanne Morphew spent the final months of her life trying to do something difficult: leave. She told her friends. She told her family. And 4 days before she vanished, she put it in writing, in a text message Barry deleted, and investigators recovered anyway. "I'm done." For days later, she was gone. For more than 3 years, her body lay in a grave nobody was searching. For 5 years, the question of who put her there has outlived 2 arrests, 1 collapsed prosecution, a disbarment recommendation, a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, a fraudulent vote, a fight over cremation, and a husband who has never once changed his answer. 2 daughters grew into adults during those 5 years, carrying a question most people never have to ask about their own father, a question they have, so far, only ever answered one way, in public, on the record. Friends in a small mountain town lit candles year after year, refusing to let the case go cold even when the headlines moved on to other tragedies. A district attorney lost her license to practice law over how she handled the case. A lead investigator's own words became the reason the first prosecution collapsed. Suzanne Morphew's case has cost almost everyone involved in it something, except, so far, an answer. We still don't know, not with the certainty a courtroom requires, exactly what happened inside that house on Mother's Day weekend, 2020. We don't know how her body traveled the distance between where she vanished and where she was finally found, 3 counties and 3 years removed from anyone's search grid. We don't know if October 2026 will finally deliver the verdict this case has been circling for half a decade, or if it will end, like the first attempt, in another collapse no one saw coming. 5 years later, a jury still hasn't decided what happened between those 2 moments. But one fact has never changed, never been disputed, and never required a verdict to be true. Suzanne Morphew was alive when she sent that text. For days later, she wasn't. She tried to leave him. Then she vanished without a trace.